There's a really cool television show that people should check out that's probably out on DVD now. If Halloween is coming up very soon, because I can't believe how fast the year is going, there's this show called Harper's Island, which is a really, really good television show that came out a while ago for on CBS. It was a 13 episode miniseries, and it was really, really interesting. The premise of the story was that it was a story about this wedding that basically Abby Mills was this girl who grew up on this island called Harper's Island. And basically what happened was that she returns to this island for her best friend's wedding. Her best friend's name is Henry, and Henry is getting married to the girl of his dreams named Trish. And Trish comes from a very wealthy family, and Henry is sort of like this good-looking guy with a great personality, but he's not filthy rich. He kind of like got lucky with a rich girl with his good looks and charm, and he's a hard worker and he loves this girl very much. And basically Abby gets invited because that is Henry's best friend, and he figured, what, come to the wedding and have a great time. And it seems like a simple story, right? But no, actually, this is a very intriguing story, because Henry and Trish get married at the place where there was a bunch of murders that happened a couple of years ago. And what happened was that while people were being murdered, one of the victims happened to be Abby's mother. And so what happens is that as they have this big wedding at a place where the murders once happened, the murders start to pop up again. And basically people are getting killed, as the show says, one by one, until we finally get to the ending, in which I won't discuss who is the killer. But when you see the ending, it's a very, very intriguing ending. Um, I will say this about the story, is that it's a very, very interesting 13 episode story. I know a lot of people have described it as soap opera, but it's not really a soap opera type of story. I guess what it is that for the first, like, from 1 to 5, I'll say, in terms of episodes, they go into the details of the characters, who's who, just sort of like to create the theme as to the character development, which is very important, because that way people understand who is Henry and who is Abby, and what's their history. And they discuss Trish's world and her rich high society friends, and discuss how Trish's father doesn't really like Henry, and that every one of these characters has some kind of motive, and that motive kind of helps develop the story as to this killer that resurfaces and starts killing off people one by one. Now, why is this happening now on a wedding day? That's the plot of the story that really thickens as the stories go on. Now, I will say this about Harper's Island: the way you figure out who the killer is, and believe me when I tell you, the greatest television show that makes you figure out who the killer is right away with their little theme is Criminal Minds. And the reason why Criminal Minds, you ought to think like the way the show does, is that every murder that happens in Harper's Island, you can almost figure out right away who's doing it if you keep the show in mind. And the way you keep it in mind is very quite simple. When you're watching the show, think of how Criminal Minds catches their criminals, the way they capture the unsub. There are two types of criminals that are in this particular story. You're either looking for a preferential killer, or you're looking for a situational predator. In this particular story, you're more looking for a situational predator than a preferential. Preferential killers are more like a particular victim has to look a certain way to have them killed off. Like, for example, Ted Bundy always looked for young pretty girls with long straight hair parted in the middle, or Jeffrey Dahmer always looked for mostly black victims as his prime target. The reason why I say situational for this particular killer or unsub is because, number one, where are these murders happening? They're happening on an island. What is his cover? Basically, a particular killer killed off a bunch of victims, including Abby's mother, which creates the cover, because the cover is basically, well, I can kill these people, and then they'll think that it was a serial killer that's resurfaced again, that's killing all people, sort of like a Jason Voorhees type of theme. But you know something? When you look into this theme, and the most important part of this whole story is that when you're watching this movie, always remember serial killers mimic behavior that they don't feel. So when you see the characters in this film, because that is the biggest pointer that when you see, because you'll see characters that look kind of fake or act kind of stupid, but they usually are the ones that are the killer. So you know something, that's how I kind of figured out who the killer was right away, because I already knew it from the first episode who it was. But you know something, as the stories went on, it really caught my attention, because how they figured out was made it so good. So as you're watching the story, you will like Harper's Island. It does have a soap opera theme to it, so you know it doesn't last that long, but the horror effects are really good. The murder, there's a lot of gore in it. Not a lot of sex in this particular show, because it's not that type of show. Had it been on Showtime or HBO, it might have been interesting. But for the most part, a lot of people love the music at the very end of episode 13, which you'll understand when you see it, because it's very sad story at the end. It's kind of bizarre, because most serial killer films that you see, you don't have that type of emotional attachment, but when you see the ending, you start crying. A lot of people started crying at the end of this film, and I say, you know something, that's why it's important for character development. I know a lot of people will watch this and say, oh my god, you know, why did Sick in the Head recommend me to watch a bunch of beautiful people who are rich and got great looks, and they're getting all the women and all this other, and the men look good and the women look good. Well, what do I care? See, the reason why that you should care, because it's a very, very well written story for a mini series, because you don't find a lot of mini series that are that good. Most of the time stories like that get canceled right away, because I remember when this was on TV, I didn't really catch much attention to it, but I must say that as I looked on, this was a very, very well made show. So if you get a chance to find it in the street, if you find it at Walmart for $5, buy it. It's worth the money for $5. I wouldn't really spend $15-20 on it, because when I brought it, that's when the show was re-releasing the movies on DVD. So I said, you know what, if you're smart, buy it for $5. If you find it, download it. However you get it, check it out. It's a really well made show. Hopefully YouTube will put it on here so you can watch it on YouTube. But otherwise, you know, for the most part, check out Harper's Island. It's a very well made show. The actors give brilliant performances. There's gore, there's violence. Like I said, it's not a sex. It would have been interesting had it been sex moments. There's little sex scenes that, you know, you don't see nudity, but you see kind of like the after effects. But for the most part, the acting is phenomenal, and it's a bizarre, sad ending. I say bizarre because you don't really become this emotional, but when you watch the last episode of that show and find out the true identity, you'll understand what I mean, because I don't want to spoil the ending for those who haven't seen it. But for the most part, check this out. You know, Harper's Island, if you get the chance, it's definitely a television series that's worth checking out. They don't have no other shows. It's just those 13 episodes. It's kind of like, you know, a mini series, movie, however you want to call it. But it's a great show. Check it out, you know, for Halloween. So take care of yourself. Use your mind. It's your best weapon.